When you think about it, there's some elementary ethics always at work in our relationships. I think from time to time we forget about them, though. The process of exchanging information, ideas, emotions, intentions of creating shared understanding, communication. Now, the shared understanding, to me, that's underrated. I don't think we fight to basically understand and share understanding between two parties. Maybe I'm wrong, just my opinion. Consistent, honest, reliable actions, which involves vulnerability, mutual respect, giving a feeling of safety, confidence, and security. Well, if you put all that together and hold it tight, that's trust. Those are the two fundamental aspects of couples' relationships. Our focus on this episode of When Black Men Talk will be constructed around trust supported by communication. Now, to do that, I'm going to welcome in an award-winning, board-certified clinical psychologist, author, an adjunct clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health at the University of Nevada, Miss Dr. Cortney S. Warren. How are you?
Wonderful. And it's so nice to talk with you about this really, really meaningful topic today.
You're right. It really is. When we think about it, and that's what I find myself saying that a lot when you think about it. But some things we kind of take for granted, and some of the things we take for granted, in a sense, are the real important things that we kind of may not be hitting the way we should hit. I want to go back and find out who is Dr. Cortney S. Warren, and how did you become inspired to become a clinical psychologist?
I was raised in a very academic household. Both of my parents are professors. And I grew up in many ways listening to them lecture and talk about very higher order constructs. My father's an economist. My mother was a philosopher. But they also really valued experiential learning, meaning they really wanted me to learn by engaging in travel and seeing different cultures and seeing how people lived and what norms were like in different places. And so I had this very eclectic mix of a classroom learning, very educated parents with a lot of travel. And I think those two things combined made me incredibly curious about human nature, because what I would experience from a really young age in the United States, traveling and abroad, is that there are certain fundamental things that seemed true of humans. We're social creatures. We need relationships. We're born and we go through really typical developmental stages, no matter where we're from or what culture we belong to. But there were also some really compelling differences that I experienced going around the world in particular. And so as I got older, I really became interested in psychology, which in essence is the study of us, the study of human nature. How do we operate? Why do we operate that way? What matters to us? What makes us different from animals? These kinds of questions that are really central and somewhat selfishly central to my own experience in the world and really to all of us. I think psychology, in an essence, is of interest to most humans because it's the study of you, right? It's the study of who you are, and you can use psychology to understand yourself better and utilize it to help yourself along the way, because life can be incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging. We're all going to have heartbreak. We're all going to have really painful experiences. We're all going to have to find ways to make money and have relationships with family and then chosen family and chosen partners. And that is not an easy journey. And so the more we can understand ourselves, the better that experience is going to be. And I know, speaking for myself, I also had a pretty tumultuous childhood in some ways. My parents were divorced when I was pretty young, as many people listening out there probably experienced. And so I think trying to understand myself and understand how to form meaningful relationships with other people was a large motivation for me to pursue psychology as well.
Wow. It's interesting to hear that from your parents, divorcing played a role and you move it into psychology. Let's go there for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If you can rewind the clock back when your parents decide to go their separate ways, what did you feel at that time?
I was about 4 years old when they divorced. And I think the truth is that it's much better for all of us that they got divorced because they really had a very traumatic dynamic, I would say. They were clearly not happy. They fought a lot. It wasn't really a very safe household. And I will say that part of my interest in understanding romantic relationships and understanding the dynamics of creating a trusting relationship for myself as I aged is that I was pretty aware from a relatively early age that I did not fundamentally trust anyone. And a lot of that came from being in a pretty chaotic early childhood environment where my parents, as much as they wanted to be there for me, were not particularly emotionally available and sometimes not even physically available. And so when I started dating and going through adolescence, as all of us do, I knew that my reactions to my romantic partners seemed pretty unhealthy and seemed even in need of treatment, right? Where I was kind of looking around and thinking, does everybody feel this way? Is everybody uncomfortable with closeness? Does everyone struggle to trust that this person is going to call when they say they will, or show up the next day, or actually care about me? Because I knew I was having those reactions. And I think one of the things that really comes to play when we talk about adult communication and adult romantic relationships, which I know is the topic here today, is that what we experienced as children in our relationships with our parents and our caregivers actually can dramatically influence how much you will trust your romantic partners and how much you are willing to be close and feel safe with adults as you date. And I think that's a benefit of psychology and of studying psychology that really, really is important for any of us as adults who realize we might have behavioral patterns in our relationships that don't serve us well. And we don't always understand why we have them or how we got that way. And really taking the time to look in the mirror and understand what you're bringing to your romantic relationships, independent of the partner, independent of who you're talking to, is really critical to learning how to trust and bond and connect with a meaningful romantic partner.
Hmm. Very interesting. It makes me wonder, someone that let's say they're approaching a relationship, one side of the relationship, one of the partners, and there's some things from their childhood that they haven't really addressed. Are they approaching the relationship fairly in an honest way, or they're kind of maybe selling the other person short by not really working on some inner things that they need to attend to?
You know, I'm always going to say that we bring our baggage anywhere we go because we are who we are. So if someone is entering into a romantic relationship and they have had some really difficult experiences, either in their childhood with regard to feeling close or loved by a parent or guardian, or because they were in situations that were actually unsafe for them, they're going to bring that into their relationships with whomever they're dating. And in those cases, it's always, I'm going to say always, which I rarely say, it's always our responsibility to manage and acknowledge our insecurities as we bring them into our relationships as adults. And so if we're aware that we're insecure or that we have a hard time bonding or that we're overly jealous because we, for example, were cheated on in our last relationship, or because we had a parent who really vacated our life in childhood. And so there's an fundamental part of us that doesn't trust anyone we date, that is our responsibility to try to heal. And if you have a really wonderful, healthy romantic partner, I think this is an amazing opportunity to heal parts of ourselves in a situation with a loving mate who is willing to help you along the way, who is willing to love you through it, who is willing to listen, who is willing to allow you to be vulnerable and still be there, to give you a new set of expectations and goals and experiences that can actually really heal some of those early childhood core wounds that we may have developed when we were younger.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Some of the things that we kind of take for granted, realistically, moving into places or into a relationship when some work has not been done previously, and then that causes problems. I wonder though, how can couples approach a difficult conversation such as that?
Well, communication can be so difficult, right? It seems like something that should be common sense, relatively easy for most of us, but it really isn't. So I would always recommend that you start by speaking from your experience. And that means really approaching your partner by talking about yourself. I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind, right? And if it's something that you don't like about your partner, for example, or it's a very tense topic or a difficult topic, there are many of them for couples: money, parenting, sex, family. Like these are topics that can be very heated very quickly. To really present it as, I'm here. I want to share something with you that might be difficult for us to talk about. My goal is to do this in a helpful way that allows us to connect and understand each other better. And are you open to having that conversation? And I think the more that we can approach our mate, even with really difficult topics, maybe especially with really difficult topics, by introducing it not as a I'm right, you're wrong, not as an I'm blaming you for something or I don't like this about you, but more from our own lived experiences, the more likely our mates are to hear us and be able to see us and listen to us without feeling blamed or shamed, which are generally triggers for most humans, right? When you feel like someone is blaming you or calling you out for something that you didn't do, or even if you did do it, it can really cause a very reactive response in most of us. You've already set the stage that your goal is to have a collaborative, helpful conversation and share your perspective while listening to your partner's perspective and really have a more meeting of the minds. We're in this together. We're a team. I'm here to try to figure this out with you. That's a very good place to start.
Most definitely. I wonder, being selfless, realistically, being that always walking in that lane, can that be essential in assisting couples in communicating and building trust?
Gosh, selfless. That's such a tricky word for me. I think that for long-term romantic relationships to work, there is generally a give and take, such that we do things for our mate because it matters to them. Even if we don't want to, even if we don't like it sometimes. So in that way, I think you could probably call it selfless, because your intention is to be supportive of your partner, whether or not it's something that you want to do. But the reason that I pause a little bit is that it's also really not beneficial to our mental health to lose ourselves in our relationship such that we do everything for our mate or to benefit our mate without still having a core sense of self as an individual. When we're in relationships, there's really this balance between being part of a couple and organizing our life and our priorities and our schedules in combination with this other person who we've chosen to spend our time with and our life with, while at the same time having some autonomy, because you're still you. You're still your own individual person, also with passions and likes and friends and careers, and you don't want to lose yourself either. And so it's more of that finding a balance of how can I be a good partner? And then how can I also be authentically true to myself, which means that sometimes I may be more selfless, quote unquote, but sometimes I may have to be assertive with who I am and what my values are. And my partner may not always agree with me or be similar to me in that way. And that's okay. That's something for each couple to navigate over time.
I like the part of finding the balance, yeah, because I think that's real necessary with a lot of sectors when it comes to a relationship. Find a balance. It's Dr. Cortney S. Warren and Mark Elliott One Black Man Talk, and we're focusing basically around trust and communication in a relationship. And I want to thank you for giving us an ear. And speaking of trust, how can we maintain and basically build trust? And how should that be done to be accomplished?
Trust can be really, really tricky because, as we talked about a little bit earlier, we as individuals, when we're raised and when we're growing up in a given family and in a given cultural context with all of these experiences in our family unit growing up, but also with dating, it can give us perspectives on other people and on ourselves that make it really difficult for us to trust in general. But in addition, when you enter into a romantic relationship or actually any relationship, trust really has to be built over time. And the most important factor, I would say, to establishing trust with a partner is being authentic. That to me means that what you say and what you do match all of the time. No matter what situation you enter, no matter who you're with, no matter the social dynamic, you are who you say you are, and you do what you say you're going to do, whether I, your partner, am with you in the moment or not. And that when someone consistently shows you who they are in a real, honest way, it is probably the greatest way to build trust, because you really believe that your partner is who they say they are, and that when they go out into the world and live their life, they're still that person. And then they come back to you just like they said that they would, and they're still that person. And so it's a much easier way of existing in a partnership where you believe you can be yourself and they can be themselves.
It's an old saying that trust is earned, basically, like respect is earned. I want to ask, though, because I know you spoke of when you were coming up, you did tend to trust or not trust easy. How did you get past that of maybe allowing yourself to push past that barrier and start to trust a little bit more in a relaxed way?
So many things. And I should say, again, this is where psychology can be so helpful, because there are so many skills and ways that we can work with ourselves around trust. So one thing that I would absolutely say to anyone who is interested is that therapy and good psychotherapy, finding a good psychologist, is a wonderful way to start to explore where you're most vulnerable to not trusting people and why. So I am a huge advocate for therapy, and I personally was in therapy for a long time, starting especially when I was a young adult trying to find myself in romantic relationships. I also think that there is a wonderful opportunity in dating to explore yourself. So one thing I would recommend to anyone who's realizing that they don't trust people very easily is to think of dating as an experiment. That when you're with a partner, in a serious relationship or just more casually dating, go out there and try dating a whole host of people and see what your reaction is. When do you have emotional reactions to them? Who are you most attractive to? Why do you think that is? Who makes you feel the most insecure? Why do you think that is? And the more you can learn about yourself through your relationships, the better, from my perspective. One thing that happens that I think is unfortunate when people date is that they can very easily feel betrayed or left or less than if the relationship doesn't go well or doesn't work out. So, for example, oftentimes when people are cheated on or have someone who maybe doesn't want to be with them or doesn't love them back, their response is, something's wrong with me. Nobody's going to want me. I must be broken. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed because if I was good enough, then this person would want me or wouldn't have cheated on me or would try to get me back. The truth is that people's behavior is a reflection of them, not of you. So if someone cheated on you or cheated on you repeatedly, for example, I'm always looking for patterns, then I would start asking questions like, is there similarities in the people that you're attracted to or that you're choosing? Are you choosing people who are really not emotionally available? Why do you think that is? Or are you choosing people who are really likely to cheat on you? Why do you think that is? And really think of it as an objective observer who's trying to explore yourself and understand yourself, as opposed to a personal attack that you're not good enough or something is wrong with you, or even a conclusion like all people cheat or all men are terrible or all women are terrible, because there's so much more to learn in the experience of dating, even if the dating experience itself is painful.
I agree. I think a lot of times that happens because of people are dating with expectations and they forget part of dating is there should be a self-evaluation as well. And I think if they kind of lean into that a little bit more and maybe dial back on expectations, I think that would be beneficial. You wrote an amazing article, provoking article let me find the title here. Here we go. It was 10 things. Nope. Hang on a second. Make sure. Yeah, let's explore. It was 10 things couples do to build trust. Am I saying that correctly? I may not be.
Something like that. I think it was more about when we're in a really trusting relationship, some of the topics that couples are really willing to talk about that can be really difficult, but that continue to build trust and closeness.
That's it. Excuse me for not having the exact title at the forefront of my mind, but I have the listing, and the number one thing that you mentioned was money, financial. And it seemed like that is a lot of reasons why people tend to basically part ways. Let's get a true understanding why. That would be the number one, and why it weighs so heavily when it comes down to trust in couples and relationships.
Money can be such a difficult topic for people to talk about, particularly in more serious relationships where people are sharing costs, where maybe you're married or you live together and each person is contributing in some financial way to the well-being of their life. And one of the reasons it's so hard is that money can be really stressful. And usually it's a reflection of values, of what you care the most about. So some people are much more comfortable spending money just to have fun, or because they want to go out with their friends, or because that's kind of the lifestyle that they want. Whereas other people may be much more frugal with how they spend money, much more careful, think about savings. So it's a topic that's really ripe for arguments, because if each partner is not on the same page with how they want to spend their money or how much they want to save or who is responsible for allocating what financial decision, it can very easily lead to arguments. So it's a topic that a lot of couples avoid talking about, I would say. And when they do talk about, it can be pretty tense.
Yeah. Couples who trust each other talk about these 10 things regularly. That was the name of the article. I know it'll come back to me.
Yes.
Yes. And it's interesting because money tends to, I think a lot of times too, I'll go with the male perspective. A lot of times when we spend our money, it's kind of like spending a part of us. And sometimes when things aren't really working well, we kind of felt like we gave a part of us that wasn't truly valued or understood.
Mm.
And men don't say this, but we kind of place a premium on that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we feel like if we're being taken for granted or not being truly seen for the things we do with our finances. Quietly, we tend to kind of feel a sense of, I'll use the word overlooked or disrespect. I'll use both of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes too, that plays in a part of the finances because men will look to basically provide, care and stuff of that nature. So a lot of times I believe when things aren't going well, men will kind of subconsciously start to think, okay, here I'm doing this financial, I'm doing that. Am I really being respected for it or being acknowledged for it?
Mm-hmm. I could see that for sure, particularly given a couple's gender role or even the opportunity to earn money. Who is earning money? Who is there an allocation of resources, quote unquote, where perhaps the male in a more stereotypical relationship is earning more money than the woman if it's a heterosexual couple, and maybe the woman is spending more time having children or taking care of the family or making meals or whatever it may be. And so the common factor in all of that oftentimes is power. It's a power struggle. It can become a power struggle where each member of a couple can kind of think, well, what are you doing for me? I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And resentment can build pretty easily on either side if two people are not feeling appreciated. And that's a bit of what I hear you saying, where there's this respect, there's an appreciation that really, again, going back to trying to find a balance, it's very unlikely that two people in a couple are going to earn exactly the same amount of money. So there's usually an imbalance in how much one person earns than the other. And being comfortable talking about that, acknowledging that that's true, and then really making plans for what's reasonable for our family or for our household. You're making more money. Maybe I am doing more at school or with the kids or whatever it is. How can we do this in a way that every one of us feels respected and appreciated for the role or contribution we're making to our family or to our household? And the more couples can do that, generally the happier they're going to be with their interactions together around finances.
Yeah, some communication is definitely needed in that department, most definitely. Your number 2 was very interesting. And I kind of could have thought this one could have been switched up to number 1, but it was number 2.
Okay.
And it was basically sex. And you would think that, sex, just sex in general. And it would seem like there would be an open conversation of trust built around that. But that's something, again, that couples should really always engage in conversation and keep that trust going. So as I was thinking, again, it could be 2 or 1, because a lot of times when we hear couples that tend to go separate ways, those kind of rotate. Either finances or sex seem to be like switch 1 or 2. So, but number 2 is sex.
Yes. It's a topic that all couples really need to feel safe talking about on multiple levels. And I mean, how often they want to have sex, what they like in bed, when they think that they're not having enough sex, when they're not feeling connected or close to their mate. There are so many aspects of sex that aren't just actually having an orgasm, but that are about feeling connected and close. And couples really differ, just like with money, with regard to how often they want to have sex and what they like, and what is a quote unquote happy, reasonable amount of sexual activity, particularly as couples have children, where their time and energy and exhaustion may shift from earlier in their relationship until later when their responsibilities get a lot bigger. And so being open about that, talking about that, figuring out what works for each partner so that ideally they're both satisfied is really, really important. When people don't talk about sex, it doesn't mean that it isn't an issue. It just means that they're not willing to engage in the difficult conversations. And I would generally suggest to people that it is in everybody's best interest to have the difficult conversations, because you can't change something unless you're willing to talk about it. Your partner may not even know that you're unhappy or unsatisfied if you're not willing to really honestly talk about who you are, what you want, what they want, and how you can make it work as a compromise for the two of you to both be content and happy.
I agree. I think communication really has to be strong there. And I would actually think, too, that communication about sex should be part of the honeymoon stage. Because when couples tend to meet, whether they're going to get married or not, that their sex at the beginning, you could consider the honeymoon stage. It's not talked about. It's just reactive. It's happening.
Yes.
And then once it changes, it's left to like, you go to your corner, I go to my corner. There's no there's no communication. And maybe at that point when it's in the early part, the entry part, definite part of the relationship, to have dialogue then and really speak, because as you said, as time changes and things will happen in life, it will change. And it's amazing how for a lot of us, we don't put life into sex. We believe how it starts, it's just going to stay that way for the next 30, 40 years. And we don't add life in as an ingredient. And as you spoke with kids coming at nature. And, when you said that, I thought about it, because you hear a lot of men basically speak and say, well, the kids are getting more attention than I'm getting attention.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, I'm thinking that they're not thinking that, okay, because the child is here, that some of the time and energy you were getting now has to go to the child.
Right.
It can't just basically, there's a change in things that happen. And even during the pregnancy, that should be a conversation that, in my opinion, should take place, because that's where the communication can really help. And then when it's not there, someone start to feel a certain way and they can get in their feelings, not thinking fully and fully understanding what's taking place.
Absolutely. And it perhaps sound a little bit strange to say this, but it isn't uncommon for men or partners to be kind of jealous of their lack of partner's time and attention while they're pregnant or after they have children. Because there is, as you just said, during sort of the honeymoon phase is very different than a lot of the love that emerges over time. It's generally early in the relationship. It's very exciting. It's a fantasy in many ways. It's very stimulating. It's very euphoric. And it's not going to stay that way for very long in general. And so if that's your expectation, and then let's say you stay together and you develop hopefully a more attached relationship that is more safe, that is more authentic, where you know each other better, actually, but you're getting less time and less attention because of the realities of life, that you're probably working more, or maybe you have different responsibilities because you do have family. It can be difficult because sometimes men particularly will say they feel less important. In the beginning, they felt so special and the world kind of revolved around them, around their partner. But once they have children and once the relationship enters into a safer space, their partner is not thinking about or taking the time as much to be with them. And that can be a bit of a jealous experience. So even talking about that, the more people can be honest about what they're thinking and feeling, again, the more you have the opportunity to connect with your mate, even through the transitions of life that are absolutely going to be there. And as you talk about it, each of you can figure out, how are we going to get through this phase? How can we show our appreciation? How can we show how attracted we are to each other now? Or how do we do it if we're too tired and my wife isn't really that interested in sex right now because she just had a kid and she's exhausted? How do you communicate that and make behavioral choices that still acknowledge how important your partner is or your husband is, so that you can get through that transition without having your relationship fall apart along the way?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah, communication there is huge. And as I listen to you about the jealousy, and that is real. That is real. I just don't understand how it can be. But it's real. But I will say, standing in men, I think a lot of men, and then when it comes down to that part of the honeymoon stage and that part of the dating, their expectation believe that what I'm experiencing today is going to be like this every day. And that's not realistic. It's just not realistic.
It's really not.
No, it's
It's
not.
really not.
Yeah.
And the flip side too is it's not even realistic for women. I mean, one of the hard realities about humans is that we oftentimes are attracted to lots of people. And when you're married, it doesn't mean you're not attracted to other people along the way too. And that can be very threatening for women also. Like it really can be a difficult conversation to say, wow, you're tired, you're raising our children, I don't get as much attention from you, I feel kind of jealous and left out. Like there are all these new people who I still think are good looking or I'm still attracted to in some way. That can be a very threatening topic, but it still warrants conversation because it's still probably true. And so as a couple, I am someone who believes that it is always better to be honest with your mate, even if it's a difficult topic. And so even be willing to say that and have it be safe enough that you can say that. And you as a partnership get to talk about that to try to understand each other and then make adjustments, change to ensure that each of you still feel respected and still feel loved and appreciated along the way.
Yeah. I have a question that just popped in my head when you were saying about the safety, because how could, and this I think would be the ultimate of safetiness. How can someone approach a conversation with their partner and be honest, straightforward and honest, and the partner that they're speaking to don't take it as a personal offense, don't really pull back into their feelings, and basically just understand what they're just saying?
Well, that's the journey. That's what I would say. That's the journey for each and every one of us. Can we develop enough self-confidence and enough security in ourselves that we are open to listening to anything our partner wants to share without rejecting them, without hating them, without thinking that it means that something is wrong with us? Can we be there, listen, be open long enough that we don't get angry or reject them or hate them or run away? That is, I think, the dance of intimacy that we're really all going to go through if we're having a meaningful long-term romantic connection. And it's hard. I would say it's hard. You're very likely, if somebody's being honest with you, to hear things that you probably wish weren't true. You don't want to hear some of the things that your partner might be thinking or feeling. But part of being a really raw, honest couple is essentially saying, whatever you want to talk to me about, I want to be here to listen, and I want to try to understand you. And I am going into our dialogue being as non-judgmental as I can be. I might still have my own feelings afterwards. I might have to go talk to my friends after this talk. I might have to go get a good therapist because I don't know what to do because I'm feeling my own vulnerability or my own fear or my own sadness. But part of being a good partner is being willing to listen to and understand who your mate is as well. So some people would say, well, if they're cheating or if they're doing something I don't like, I don't want to know. Just don't tell me. I am never going to say that that's a good choice. I'm going to say, actually, I think the ideal is for us to be as honest with ourselves as possible and try to be as honest with our mate as possible because it allows the opportunity for closeness and understanding. And at the end of the day, I think trying to be close to our mate is the best way to have a meaningful bonded connection.
Absolutely. I love that phrase, the dance of intimacy. Wow. I love that one. I'm going to have to use that again at some point. I'm not sure.
Okay, good.
I like
Please
that.
do.
Okay. Number 3 on the list was parenting, which is interesting. Parenting.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play into the trust of the daily life between two couples or between a couple?
Parenting is hard. For anybody listening out there who has children, I probably don't have to say that more than once because you're smiling and laughing. Parenting is exhausting and constant, especially if we want to do it well, because we're thinking about our kids and we're thinking about, well, what values do I want to pass along to them? And what do I think matters the most? And how can I raise them so that they're behaving in a way that I'm proud of? And how do I want to be there for them, right? There are so many questions and it can be so stressful to figure out how to be a good parent. And one of the reasons that couples fight a lot about parenting is that we all have different ideas and different values around how to do it. So I would say that most parents want the best for their kids, and most parents aren't really fighting about the core values of what they're hoping for their children. They love their children. They want them to learn. They want them to do well in school. They want them to be respectful to their siblings and to their family. But how they think they should act in order to raise the child that they're aspiring to varies dramatically. How do you punish a child? What role is it for you versus your partner? How do you communicate with your kid about how you want them to be? How do you handle it when they misbehave, which they're all going to do? How do you handle it when they're having trouble emotionally, or when they have great friends, or when they don't have any friends? There are so many situations that are going to emerge as a parent that oftentimes parents actually aren't sure how to handle, or maybe really don't like the way their partner is handling it. And so it ends up being a very tense topic for a lot of couples that they have to navigate over time. As you can imagine too, if you're in a household that has two parents, that will come with its own challenges because you're both trying to be yourself and teach your child the way that you see fit, which might be very different from your mate. But it's also difficult as a single parent or as a divorced parent, where you're still in a relationship with your ex, probably. It may not be a relationship that's romantic anymore, but if you share a child, you are always going to be in a relationship with that person. And so figuring out how to collaboratively raise a child, even if you're not in a romantic relationship anymore, in a way that's in your child's best interest is really tough for a lot of couples or exes.
Yeah, I can see that. But the great thing you said there, a lot of it was great, but the one that really stood out, to me, if you keep at the front and the center what's best for the child interests and not your personal own,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that'll always work out well.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, painful past experience. That always has a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be very hard to share with any human, let alone your mate, painful experiences that you've lived through in your life. Sometimes they're really difficult things that you lived through that other people did to you. Sometimes there are things that you did to other people that you're ashamed of or that you feel guilty about because you acted in a way that you're not proud of. And sharing those experiences with your mate in the interest of them understanding you, in the interest of really exploring how those experiences influenced their life today and their reactions to your new relationship or your current mate is really, really important, but it can be very scary. It requires a lot of vulnerability. Being vulnerable, being open, sharing pained aspects of yourself is generally very scary for people because they're not things we feel very good about, or they're really painful and we don't really want to talk about it. But it's a really essential way to feel close and to build intimacy with your partner.
Mm-hmm. Number 5 surprised me a little bit. Time. That one, caught me by surprise.
Well, time is perhaps the most precious commodity we have. And oftentimes couples fight about time and scheduling because they don't have enough time together, because they perhaps don't share the same values about time, maybe because they have so many responsibilities. And so really being willing to ask their partner, do we need to spend some time together? Do you have time to spend with me? Or if you have children, who is picking up the child or the 2 children? Who's on duty? How do we navigate time so that we're sharing some responsibility and aren't breeding resentment? You're going to hear that that's kind of a key in all communication. Talking so that it doesn't build resentment or anger or feeling taken advantage of. That's really a key. And so talking about your schedule is really important for most couples.
Yeah, building resentment. Yeah, that is key. It really does. And the ironic thing about building resentment, it builds quietly.
Yeah,
it does. Over a period of time. It's just, you wake up one day and it's there.
Yep.
you didn't need a construction, but it's there.
Yep.
Number 6, insecurities and shame. This one's interesting.
Mm-hmm. You know, it somewhat relates to the painful past experiences, but I think when we're talking about shame and insecurity, it really is about sharing with your partner things that are triggering for you or really difficult topics for you because they aren't fully healed yet. So being willing to own, gosh, I am struggling in this situation because I feel insecure. I am struggling in this situation because I'm reading into your behavior in ways that aren't fair to you. And it's because of my issues. That's a really difficult thing to share, but it's a really, really important one to acknowledge and take responsibility for.
Okay. Now, once someone has, let's say, insecurity and they have shame and they bring it to their partner and they're speaking open about it, do they still have somewhat of an obligation to deal with those insecurities and shame?
Yes. Yes. We are always responsible for our own behavior, and we are always responsible for exploring ourselves and trying to understand who we are and why we're having whatever reaction we're having at the time. So you cannot get out of this life unscathed. It is always your responsibility to figure yourself out. I think the important thing about relationships, particularly, is that you are willing to acknowledge that you may be having a reaction that is harming your mate, but it is actually because you are insecure in something that you need to work on for yourself. That's really the key.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is some believe once they display or share about their insecurities or shame, that's enough. And the other person should basically understand that and make the adjustments. And they feel that relieve them from doing anything or any work. Because once now
Mhm.
you know, just go around it. When it pops up, go around it. Just know that that's who I am, and that's where that self-evaluation and that self-growth and that self really reinventing yourself to me need to take place. Number 7, mistakes.
Yeah. A lot of people really struggle apologizing.
No.
They really do. It's really a hard thing for a lot of humans to apologize. When we make mistakes, which we all will, it is essential that you apologize. That might include truly communicating, I'm very sorry, but it also may include, what do I need to do to help you forgive me? How can I, given that I made this mistake, how can I help us rebuild the trust? How can I help us rebuild the connection? It isn't enough usually just to say the words. You actually have to change your behavior, and you probably should ask your mate what they need from you in order to rebuild the connection.
I'm going to spend a second here because I don't think people understand when they resist and are reluctant to apologize what it says to the other person.
Mm.
And I know it's difficult, and I don't think it should be to apologize. To me, if it's in your heart, it should come out easy. It should happen.
Mm-hmm.
It should just flow. But I don't think they really pay attention to when they fight to ignore the whole aspect of apologizing, what it says to the other person.
Mm-hmm. Even if you think you're right, even if you think your partner is wrong, even if what you did seems relatively insignificant to you, when you apologize, you are taking responsibility for your role and telling your partner, in these ways, I didn't act the way that I wanted to. I didn't hold myself to the ideal that I should or that I aspire to. And I truly feel badly about that. It really shows your mate that they see you and that you are strong enough to acknowledge the unideal aspects of yourself, that you are strong enough to say, I can own my part and I feel badly about the things that I did and I want to do better. That is such a strong selling point for your mate to want to be with you, because it shows that not only are you strong enough to admit the truth, but that you're willing to do it differently because you want to do better and you want them to feel better. And that is really part of being a team in a relationship.
Yeah. I tell you too, in my honest opinion, when someone realistically humbles themselves enough to apologize, it affects the other person's heart in a way
Yeah.
that's unspoken. It just does. And I think that's what we forget or misunderstood about it. It softens, it warms the heart. It does.
Mm-hmm.
Family is number 8.
Family is always a tricky one because family dynamics are generally tricky. Even if you adore your family and love your parents or your siblings or your cousins or whomever they are, family dynamics can be difficult. And so talking to your partner about how much you value your family, about what that means in terms of your time and your effort, even talking to them about relationships that are difficult for you and that you're not sure how to handle them or how you want to try to handle them or how to develop better relationships with family is really critical.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that's, that sounds nice. A lot of times, the outside family to a couple, you have to tell them to shut up.
Mm.
You really do. You just have to tell them, I don't want to hear. But at the same time, you can't bring them information and not expect them to be reactive to what you're bringing them.
You know, as a partnership, as a couple, it's really up to you to figure out how you want to interact with your family of origin. And that's going to differ from person to person and family to family. But talking openly with your mate about how you feel, what you think, what you want, and what you aren't willing to do. Sometimes it requires setting boundaries. Sometimes it requires saying, I'm actually not willing to spend more time with my cousins or with my parents or with this one uncle who I seem to fight with all the time. And I leave those interactions just feeling really badly. It may mean that you have to shift, even if it's in a short-term situation, because it isn't serving you well as a person or as a couple.
This is a very strong list. It really is. There's so many things here that, as you spoke earlier, there's so much that goes into a relationship. And these dynamics, they're powerful ones. Number 9, power struggles.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, everything about relationships, I think you could argue, is about power. And it goes into the conversation that we've been having this entire time about feeling appreciated and not taking for granted. That you are in an intimacy dance that is around power. Who has it? Who gets to decide the finances? Who gets to decide the time? Who gets to decide whether we go to Thanksgiving with the family or not? Who gets to make choices? And that's inherently about power. It's about who has it and who gets to decide what you're going to do as a household. So having conversations that are very open with your mate, that acknowledge power, that acknowledge what you want and what your mate wants, and trying to find that middle ground again, where each person gets to have a voice and feels heard and feels acknowledged. And probably sometimes they're going to get their way doing something you don't really want to do. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes you're going to get your way. But it's inherently about the shared power that really is indicative of having a healthy bonded interaction with your mate. That sometimes you let your mate have more power than you do, and sometimes you have more power, and you have to figure that out together.
Now, the one in a certain situation that doesn't get their way, how should that one handle that?
I think it's a choice. You have to be willing to say to yourself and your mate, this isn't what I would choose. This isn't consistent with my opinion or what I would like to do. But in spite of that, I'm doing this because it's important to you. And I love you and we're a team. So I am willing to defer to you sometimes. And this is one of those times. I think it's that inherent, don't do it if you're going to resent them. Don't do it if you're going to blame them. Don't do it if you're going to come back and throw it in their face. Do it if you're willing to say, even though this isn't what I would choose for myself, I am part of a team. I am part of a couple with you. And so I'm doing this because I care about you. That's the choice.
Wow. You say that, the person going to change it, but let's do it your way.
Yep. And sometimes you might say no. Sometimes you're like, I know you really want this. This is not a situation where I can participate. You're going to have to be on your own on this one. And that's okay too.
Wow. That's a beautiful thing right there. Beautiful, man. While you're speaking, I forgot my way. What was that? What choice did I decide? Number 10, dreams and aspirations.
Yes. We don't want to forget about our goals and our dreams and the things that we ourselves or our mates are excited about, things that are fun, things that are about a future and things that inspire us. We don't want to forget about those things too, because those are a lot of what give us meaning. And so talking to your mate about things that they really hope for themselves, things that they really aspire to, things they really love to do, hobbies or interests or things on their bucket list, really giving yourself and your partner things to talk about that are fun for the future, that are exciting, that are really going to lead to some excitement in a bonded, interesting way will keep your relationship still feeling alive and new and fresh in some ways. You don't want your marriage to become stagnant. You don't want it to just feel like heavy conversations about responsibility. There's going to be a lot of that. But don't forget to have some fun and some dreams along the way too.
Dr. Cortney S. I want to thank you. Wow, that was a lot of great information. Great information.
Well, thank you for such an engaging conversation.
Wow, I had no other response. I mean, what else could I do with such information? It just pulls it right out of me because it's amazing how, as I said earlier, some of the things we touched on, we kind of take for granted. We don't think about. We kind of just move in a sense, not almost like robotic. And I love a lot of things that you shared because it should force us to think and really, focus on trust and communication. And if you're involved with someone that your heart is into, it's worth it. It's more than worth it.
So worth it. It's so worth it. It will help you grow. It will help your partner grow. And it has the potential to lead you to grow together over time.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm fortunate that you have agreed to come back one more time and discuss one of your books because we know you're an author. So we're looking forward to that.
Wonderful. I will look forward to it as well.
Okay. I appreciate it. Folks, want to thank you for giving us an ear. As always, I love to say God loves you and I love you too. Continue to go along your way in a strong way. God bless. Take care.